You're listening to a Roddenberry podcast.
You're listening to Mission Log the Orville, an episode-by-episode discussion of the adventures of the crew of the USS Orville. Welcome to another episode of Mission Log the Orville. This week, Lasting Impressions, the one where Gordon dates a sales manager at Macy's while Bortus and Klyden take up smoking. We'll discuss the meanings, morals, and messages to see if this episode aligns with the Roddenberry Star Trek philosophy. My name is Mike Richards.
And I'm Jessica Lynn Verdi. Mission Log the Orville is a conversation that really depends on your participation. Share your thoughts, ideas, and tell us what we missed at ML_the Orville on Twitter, Mission Log Pod on Facebook, or you can even email us at missionlog-theorville@roddenberry.com. If you're watching this on the Roddenberry YouTube channel, please hit like and subscribe. And remember, we might use your comments on an upcoming episode.
Please hit like and subscribe.
Please.
Speaking of comments, last episode, if you remember, Blood of Patriots, we were both stumped. At least I was stumped as to why a scene from Planet of the Apes was included in the episode. And we asked our listeners and viewers for help. Well, Ryan Peterson commented at podcast.roddenberry.com. In response to the question of why Planet of the Apes, I think it's either just because it's a cultural touchstone and Seth is unable to avoid including cultural touchstones and nostalgia, or it's a very subtle and maybe tenuous parallel or mirror of the story. There are two reasons I can think as to why that movie, and both are much weaker than has been typical for the show. First, the scene that Gordon is showing is the scene where Taylor finds out that the planet he thought was an alien planet the whole time is actually Earth. He's showing this to a person who he's thinking the whole time is human, but turns out that she is not human at all.
Right.
Or it could be to draw a parallel between Oren's suffering and Taylor's suffering. Again, this is a subtle thing, but in the second movie, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, Taylor is the one to trigger the Omega device, destroying the planet. Actually, this was Charlton Heston's idea, as he didn't want to be pulled in for interminable sequels. Must be nice as an actor.
That's really funny.
It's the ultimate scorched earth tactic from a guy that already started the movie cynical and without much faith in humanity. Oren isn't destroying humanity directly, but he's taking an extreme approach of his own. Again, both of these are fairly tenuous.
I think this is awesome feedback and exactly what we were looking for. So thank you so much, Ryan, for your thoughts. I think the more I think about it, Ryan's convinced me that it's like not a red herring, but it's our first clue that something's going on with quote unquote Oren's daughter. Right.
The only thing that I could come up with in my little caveman brain was that Planet of the Apes is famous for that big twist ending. So I think it was just sort of signaling the fact that there was going to be a big sort of twist ending at the end of this episode. But I think Ryan really found much better examples of why that's the case.
Totally. And one last thing, too, Gordon's going, right? Like the Statue of Liberty. And if she were a human child, she might know that more readily.
She didn't know what the Statue of Liberty was.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Of course,
so she wasn't a human statue. So
you're exactly right.
So, but again, but it's so subtle. And Ryan's right. It's like tenuous because we're not supposed to. We know something's wrong with her, but we have no idea she's not a human child, and
right.
She doesn't talk at all. So it's like really hard to. It's subtle, but I think it's not as weird as we thought it was. So thank you so much, Ryan. And now, with that, we're gonna listen to Mike's recap of this week's episode, and let's just see how we can get through this one, Mike.
This is going to be tough. I already confided in Jessica that I'm going to have a hard time.
I'm not stealing your emotion. I am sharing in it. Just
making it through this one. So here goes. Lasting Impressions. Prologue. The Orville is carrying the contents of a 20th century time capsule to the Delta Pavonis Museum. Among the more notable contents are cigarettes and a cell phone. John offers the services of the engineering team to access the data, a little teching the tech, and boom, messages, media storage. And who's this? Laura Higgins from Saratoga Springs, New York. She just got a new iPhone, so she decided to put her old one in the time capsule. Gordon seems smitten as the opening credits roll. Act 1. Dr. Sherman scrolls through the 400-year-old text messages and photos, applying logic to put them in historical perspective. WTF. When finished, Gordon is left alone with the phone to, certainly not steal it, but more on that later. In the Machlin's quarters, Bortus and Klyden are examining a cigarette. They're both curious and decide to light up. They like it. A lot. And they synthesize a few more. Well, actually, 500 more. Oh boy. In the environmental simulator, Gordon is able to use the phone to recreate Laura's world. Laura's life. Laura. Looks like it's time to crash Laura's housewarming party. Act 2. Gordon and Laura get to know each other. He's a pilot, and a friend's Lorenzo's, who, by the way, is a tool, but, he's the best tool.
The best tool.
She's a sales manager at Macy's, an aspiring musician, and recently broke up with her boyfriend. He's invited to watch her play a gig on Tuesday night. In engineering, Gordon is telling John all about his time in the simulator. John seems concerned. His first question, does Dr. Sherman know you did this? No, but it's okay. I put the phone back. Next question, did you do drugs in there?
Ugh.
No, man, it's a perfectly natural high. John's parting word of advice, just keep a sanity check on all of this. I know it seems real, but this girl's been dead for 3.5 centuries. Sadly, Gordon knows that too. Act 3. Ed and Kelly are perusing a 2015 copy of the USA Today when they're summoned to the bridge to address an issue. That issue is, of course, Bortus. He's smoking on the bridge, but have no fear. Kelly promises that she and Ed will talk to him about it. Back to Gordon. Looks like he raided the Macy's clearance rack as he shows up to see Laura's performance. It's a simple piece. She's raw, exposed, singing about love. That's all she's got to say. After her set, Gordon and Laura talk about her hopes and her dreams. Most of all, she wants to be remembered. They also talk about her relationship with Greg. He was passionate and smart and funny, but irresponsible. She thinks Gordon is, get this, a really good listener. Time to exchange phone numbers and line up their next date. Game night at Laura's. Oh, and bring your friends. And your phone. Wait. My what? Synthesizing his very own cell phone, Gordon links it to simulator program Laura Alpha and wastes no time texting his new girlfriend? Now it's time to round up some friends for game night. The pitch to the gang is awkward, but they'll play along. Right after they deal with the Machlins, who are extremely susceptible to nicotine addiction. They need to quit cold turkey, and until Dr. Finn can formulate an injection, they'll have to support each other. Yeah. Playing Pictionary at game night, Gordon is, he's not good, but Laura is able to carry the team. After the party breaks up, Gordon spends the night at Laura's, and oversleeps for work the next morning. Time for an intervention. In the mess hall, Ed, Kelly, John, and Tal express their concern. It's just a program, like their Catboy program, or Bortus' Sex Lagoon. Gordon gets defensive and goes back to work, and by work, he means the simulator, because, relationships are work. Meanwhile, the new era of mutual support and encouragement among our favorite Machlin couple is not going well. Klyden is sneaking a cigarette in the airlock. Come on, Bortus. Now's your chance, buddy. You got him in the airlock. Anyway, they're each hiding cigarettes, a lot of cigarettes, but starting now, they'll watch each other closely. Unannounced. Oh, just wait till next week. Unannounced, Gordon shows up at Laura's to find her reunited with Greg. They've decided to work things out. She's really sorry and hopes she and Gordon can be friends. It turns out all of this was right there in the phone data. She got back together with Greg. She could even see herself marrying him. John thinks it's for the best. Gordon's not so sure. So donning his hippest JCPenney activewear, Gordon goes back to the simulator to delete Greg.
Dun, dun, dun.
Act 4. Gordon finds Laura at work, taking it uncharacteristically seriously. She's getting a big promotion. And they're also getting serious, planning a vacation together. Gordon says he'll take her on vacation if he can sing with her at the pub. Pub? What are you talking about? Laura would have a heart attack if she were to sing in front of an audience. Holding the simulation, Gordon learns that Laura is different because she never knew Greg. He was part of her that encouraged her to do what she loved. Later in Gordon's quarters, Kelly checks in to see how he's doing. She explains that humans are born a blank slate, and over the course of our lives, we're shaped by the totality of our relationships. You can't just pick and choose which parts of your life you want to change. Gordon is going to miss her, but Kelly reminds him that she reached out over several centuries and got a guy to fall in love with her. We should all be so rare. Tensions have reached a boiling point between Bortus and Klyden just as Claire arrives with their injections. At the pub, Gordon finds Laura singing a familiar tune. He joins her on stage to sing the last few lines with her. He really does love her, and that's all he's got to say. Aww. He also tells Greg that he's a lucky guy and that he's leaving to take a job as a test pilot on a new aircraft design. They say it might even make it to space. Laura hopes that they'll stay in touch, but all Gordon can offer is that she will never be forgotten. The end.
Thanks, Mike. You did it.
I got through it. It's better than I got through the episode, I'll tell you that.
Totally. Same.
This was a tough one. And when I got the phone call back in September to co-host Mission Log the Orville with you, I'm telling you, the immediate episode that I thought of was this one. Huh. And just how tough maybe not tough, but I'll say tough for lack of a better word. It's going to be to cover because it's so deeply personal to me, and it's I think by far the episode that speaks to me the most. So we'll get more and more into that the further we go. Yep,
let's do it. Let's say I'm glad that I'm not the only one that's probably going to cry, because I was going to be like, oh, I'm going to cry and I don't want to, and so I'm glad that I'm not alone. Let's just say that.
So no surprise, written by Seth MacFarlane. You can probably tell just by a lot of the writing style. Mm-hmm. I didn't look at that until after I had watched it a couple of times. Directed by Kelly Cronin. She also directed the season 1 episode New Dimensions and has been the script supervisor on some excellent episodes. Old Wounds, aka the pilot episode, About a Girl, If the Stars Should Appear, Krill, and Into the Fold. Music was scored by John Debney, and the song, my wife picked this out. We were watching it together. That's All I've Got to Say, from The Last Unicorn in 1982. Performed in the show by Leighton Meester and Scott Grimes. But the song was originally written by Jimmy Webb and performed by the band America for the movie. Yeah, so she picked that out, man. Tiffany was like, that's from The Last Unicorn. One of her favorite childhood films.
Wow.
Speaking of Leighton Meester, guest starred as Laura Higgins, perhaps best known as Blair Waldorf, which Blair Waldorf is really hard for a kid from Long Island to say, I'll tell you that right now.
Blair Waldorf.
Exactly. From Gossip Girl. And Tim Russ is Dr. Sherman. He's known for playing several roles across the Star Trek franchise, most notably Tuvok, less notably Tuvix on Star Trek Voyager. And this episode aired on March 21st, 2019. Interesting also, this episode received a rating of 9.1 on IMDb, which was third highest after Identity Parts 1 and 2, and was viewed by 2.9 million Americans live. However, the really interesting thing about this episode is that over the course of the week, the viewership nearly doubled with On Demand, which I think was probably the only other game in town on Fox, to 5.6 million viewers. So word of mouth really taken over on this episode, and viewers ages 18 to 49 skyrocketed by 133% over that time. So really touched a base with that prime audience, which I may have been in at the time, establishing the Orville as the best performing show on network television that week. So we're 3 episodes away from the end of season 2. And you can see that the show just keeps getting better and better and better, or at least more and more and more successful. I'll say that.
Well, I mean, I think objectively better and better, but it is being reflected. That's amazing numbers. I didn't even realize that. Because, it's easy to think that this show kind of can go under the radar. And it's not always that Fox has like a number one show also. Like they make fun of that plenty on Family Guy. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Right.
But at the same time, I'm really glad to see, like, that's Leighton Mike Meester's got to feel like I did that, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and it makes sense. We, as an audience, love a good romance story. And this episode, one of the things I'm really grateful for is that we're not also trying to figure out how to keep a planet from blowing up. We're also not trying to hide from the krill. We're just dealing with the show is better. Well, I was going to say it's better when it's dealing with the interpersonal situations. What they've done really well is make us care about these characters. And when they get into serious space crisis, we care about what happens to them too. So
yes,
they really
and you have to have that character development in order for the stakes to be real.
And Seth writing this does make so much sense. He really does love a good old bittersweet story. He does love that.
He does, and there's some things that are kind of like sprinkled into the mix that we'll get into later with meanings, morals, and messages that are, I think, very typical, or at least things I associate with Seth MacFarlane.
Totally.
And we'll maybe talk about those a little bit later.
So a couple things I noticed right off the bat, like we're looking at the array of 2015 items, right? Mm-hmm. Essentially. And it's a little, you just have to suspend disbelief and they're in space. You know what I mean? We have to realize that this is not a real thing. But first of all, like can of Coke I guess that can of Coke would be fine. But like the iPhone battery would have corroded so badly that
Sure.
thing would have exploded at that time.
I'm sure you're right.
And he even says that the circuitry is degraded. So I don't know how like a couple do makes it work,
Maybe they because I'm guessing it was all locked in that tube, right? That piece of construction tube.
Yeah.
And maybe it was airtight somehow and sealed in vacuum.
Sure. But he even said that the circuitry was degraded. So it's not like it was imperfectly. Well, everything really looked wonderful, for 400 years.
The Yankees hat looked good.
It looked pristine.
Yeah, like it still had a tag on it.
And so I do have a question, like, where are they? Because it looks like she's in California, but she says she's from Saratoga. But then there's a Yankees cap.
Sure.
And then she talks about there's not a lot of guys worth dating out there, which would suggest that it's LA. So I don't know where.
Oh, I took it as 100%. They mentioned Saratoga Springs, New York, which is just north of Albany, New York. So kind of like upstate, kind of think New York suburban.
Aren't there a lot of eligible people to date, or is it like mostly like I think she said it's dating in this town. They're all.
Yeah, I think
a very
people probably
LA question.
Yeah, I think that's somewhat universal.
Okay, fair.
But yeah, I took it as 100%, upstate New York, just outside Albany, New York, kind of thing.
Totally. They weren't dressed for it, but I guess maybe it was summer. It's possibly that it was summer.
Summer's that week and a half of summer they get.
Totally. And then I love. It's like a slight jab at an iPhone. Like we get 10 years of battery out of this. The way he's like. They probably could make our batteries last longer than they do. But
they could probably make the phones last a lot longer than they do as well.
That's true. So yeah.
So I've got a question for you. When the gang goes to Laura's party, right? Kind of skipping ahead a little bit. They're playing Pictionary, right? And Ed's like, "Hey, it's 2300," and the girl's like, "Ooh, military time. Is that like a hipster thing?" He's like, "No, Trisha, it's not."
It's not.
Like, why? Why all the hate, man?
Seth MacFarlane if I can extrapolate based off of all of the episodes of Family Guy I've watched up until this point, and this, hates hipsters.
Hates hipsters so much.
I'm sure he does.
Yeah.
I'm sure he does. I think, he's a guy who likes Frank Sinatra. I think he's like right down the middle of the road. Like he can make commentary on normal life because he likes normal life for the most part, right?
Yeah.
And then he really doesn't like when people he has opinions when people are trying too hard or aren't enough. You know what I mean? I do think he has a reverence for normal life, and I think hipsters buck the trend too much, and we do think we're too cool. And I'm saying we because I think I wanted to be a hipster for a long time. If you were to look at my shelving, you'd be like, okay, hipster.
Oh, I don't want to
be
peek
basic.
Around the corner now.
Like I know I'm a little avant-garde, but the last thing I want to be is live, laugh, love girl. You know what I mean?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
I don't want to be that.
Yeah, totally. So, game night, Pictionary, looked like fun. Caesar salad. Got a little
Laura.
Competitive. You're Laura. What does a Cobb salad have to do with Julius Caesar?
I just felt so seen because I don't know. I always worry that my competitiveness is off-putting, and it isn't not. But she is very competitive. She's very mean. And it was, I wondered if, I don't know if she has to audition for this role, but I bet you, like, maybe he had her in mind. But if she had to audition, that's the scene I would have her audition for. Like, because it's a fine line being a Dick Van Dyke or, just competitive. So she walks that line perfectly.
So yeah, when Seth was being well, not Seth, but Ed Mercer was being kind of a little bit of a buzzkill at the party. I was thinking of Captain Dick, but now we have Captain Dick Van Dyke, and I was just wondering. I challenged myself in the thought exercise of if I did not know who Dick Van Dyke was, and if I in fact did not even know Dick Van Dyke was a person, how would I attempt to draw that? And I would think there would be a van involved, and maybe something that holds back water,
right?
And then maybe something. I don't know. I don't know what else it could be.
Now, what I will say is we already know that Gordon is good at drawing.
He should have been the best at that.
So, no, he probably was.
He probably got that part just fine.
He's probably drew it just fine, but I don't think they were able to put.
And then they were probably thinking like bus, levee.
Also, if you were drawing Dick Van Dyke, what would you draw? You know what I mean? Like, it's not like you can draw Dick Van Dyke very easily.
You can draw that doctor show he was in, or whatever that was, or
I don't even know what you're talking about.
Tripping over a couch coming home to Laura Petrie. Yeah, an ottoman. Nice.
Sure, but I think he probably did the best he could, but it was probably a little crude. So I have a question. So first of all, I have two questions for you.
Okay.
Are pilots really cool?
No.
Okay, cool.
But
she seems impressed by pilots.
You do get that reaction from a subset of people.
I would be impressed. It's an impressive job in my mind.
And I think especially when I didn't know Scott Grimes was 50, when he was making this episode, because clearly everybody at that party seemed to be in like their, 30-ish, early 30s maybe.
Sure.
Late 20s.
Late 30s.
Okay. And Scott Grimes walks in. He's like, I'm a pilot, and she's got a great job too. She's a sales manager at Macy's and Spire Museum musician. But there's kind of a subset that is impressed with the job. And I think especially when maybe you're that age and you expect maybe, commercial airline pilots to be older. It's kind of just surprising. So some people are like, oh, okay, whatever. And other people are just like, you can see that they are truly surprised that they're talking to a real life pilot. I think it's
cool. I think it's, I just think it's a cool job. We love the idea of flying. And then when someone tells it's like you're meeting a fantasy. It really is a cool job, I think. But and it's so funny. I do relate to Laura in a lot of different ways. I, too, up until a point, was nervous being on a plane, primarily because I wasn't on a plane all that much. Right. And then when I started flying more, I was like, well, my odds have been pretty good up to this point. And then you start learning about the odds, and you start understanding that your fear in a plane is loss of control, not necessarily flying. So if you just resign to the experience, you should be having a good time. But she's right. I agree. The turbulence is just off-putting. But and Gordon explains it with physics, that basically the plane's in a Jell-O mold. But he doesn't explain what the metaphorical Jell-O mold is around the plane. Can you explain that?
So I would have made a different creative choice.
Let's do this.
Had I been explaining turbulence.
Great.
But I think Gordon's point, it made sense to an extent, was that you are inside an air mass. The airplane is inside basically a mass of air.
Air pocket, would you say? Like just in my brain? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, air pocket's a term that gets used that, honestly, I don't even know what that is.
Okay,
It's not I never felt like that was a legitimate aeronautical term.
So what's air mass then?
So it is an air mass is a large expanse of air that has different properties and different characteristics based on its humidity, based on its temperature, based on how fast it's moving, and based on the qualities of maybe adjacent air masses. If one is warm and one is cold, there tends to be rising and sinking air, which tends to cause turbulence. If there is a cold air mass and it's being heated on a sunny day, the sun heats the earth, that causes warmth, the warm air rises, and then you get turbulence that way. So depending on the type of air mass you're flying through, some are very smooth, some can be very turbulent. Needless to say, though, the airplane is much like Gordon's theoretical aircraft flying in Jell-O, is flying inside an air mass, and if that air mass moves around, the airplane is simply moving inside the air mass. Now, sadly, damage can still be done to the airplane, and contents inside the aircraft can still get jostled and tossed around and move about during flight, which is why it's important to keep your seatbelt buckled, observe the seatbelt sign, buckle, stay buckled if you're not in there, secure your carry-ons. It's not a law. It's the law. It's not a law. It's a good idea to observe the fast.
No, I hear you. I think I wear my seatbelt the entire time anyway, but that's just me. So
yeah, so that's the idea behind turbulence, and it is what the aircraft and seatbelts and storage bins are capable of withstanding is far, far, far greater than what feels uncomfortable to a passenger. So typically when you feel, you're being jostled around, it is nowhere near any kind of limit on the aircraft or any kind of limit that would cause any damage to the aircraft or any injury to people inside, as long as you are careful and aren't up moving about, at a time where you're told to stay seated.
So I know we have so much to talk about, but I have one more question about flying. I was told once, and that what you're explaining is the phenomenon of over-engineering, which should be really comforting to people too. Like if you're on an elevator and it says that the max capacity is 3,500.
I can get on anyway.
Exactly. Good for you. It probably is 5,000 as opposed.
Right.
They're probably just not telling you. They're not, because they know humans are going to go, "What's the limit? How can I push it?" So I once heard that the airplane's wings are able to be bent to the point where they could touch each other on either side. Is that true?
It seems
unrealistic to me.
That's a little far. But they do flex quite a bit. And you can see on a large aircraft, large wide-body aircraft, the airplane sitting on the ground, the wings would be much, much closer to the ground than after they take off, and they're actually lifted up in the air. And then there is actually a certain amount of flex built into them. I've heard on one particular large wide-body aircraft that they can flex, the wingtips can flex up to 29 to 30 feet.
So that's pretty large. Yeah, it's not like touching each other, which sounds insane.
Right. Not that far, but they can flex quite a bit. And different aircraft designs have different amount of wing flex in them. And that flex is designed to for a number of reasons. One, it's to absorb the turbulence so that when you're flying through, much like having a softer shock absorber on a car will help to smooth the ride if you go over a bumpy road. The flex in the wings would help to accommodate some of the turbulence as well. Another thing that they're designed to do is actually provide maximum lift at different speeds with with the different level of deflection that they have. So kind of a variable geometry thing.
I listen. I as opposed to sounding cool, I'd rather know the logic and the science. So you're helping me feel really good. And I think Gordon was just trying to get laid, and it worked.
But he was honestly said what he did. She was impressed. It does offer different levels of like an in as far as the conversation goes. I mean, some people are genuinely interested in it, other people aren't, and then you have to find a different something to talk about with the pretty girl whose party you're crashing.
I got it. So like I said, we have a lot more to talk about. There's a couple more things we could talk about here because this is, again, it's just an enjoyable episode, right? So how do you feel about them talking to each other at the bar, like trying to decompress after going to
I liked it. I think it was probably a conversation that would have taken to get where they got, which was, sort of hopes and dreams and the former relationship talk is probably not a first 5-minute conversation.
Right.
But on TV, you really only have a few minutes to do that. So I think it was for context, and I think it was for
I thought that
for us getting to know to know Laura was important to have.
Well, I was going to say, you never asked about an ex, but what I was really asking for you, because you seems like you wanted the bar of the friends talking at the mess hall is what I was asking. That seemed. I was incredulous because how could you wait a whole day to talk about it?
Right. So it was kind of weird because that one started, and I have some notes on there, but that one started with Kelly saying it was without a doubt one of the top 5 weirdest experiences of her life.
Right.
Now, I have not been hitchhiking on all of Kelly's life, but I can tell you this. I know that she has been in a zoo. Mm-hmm. She has flown through 2-dimensional space.
Right.
She was incarcerated along with Bortus for being Jilliac. Mm-hmm. She went to the Krill for help against the Kalon. That's kind of a weird thing to have to do. And she got blooshed by Delario in front of her husband twice. Now, according to her, of those 5 things, Pictionary was weirder than at least one of those.
That's weird.
That's
Maybe she's used to getting blooshed on.
That's just a Tuesday.
I mean, maybe she just likes it. Maybe we're not gonna kink shame here.
No, not at all. Not at all. In fact, strike that one from the record.
Correct.
I'll have to come up with a different number 5.
Or just believe women, Mike.
Yeah, just believe that that's one of the weirdest things that she's ever had happen.
That's right.
So I think. And by weird, they mean specifically the relationship that was starting to form between Gordon and Laura.
I think that's right.
Because what was accomplished there was actually really cool. Like, I don't know what Dr. Sherman, a.k.a. Tim Russ, a.k.a. Tuvix, was going to go do with the stuff on the table. But if he was just going to take it to Delta Pavonis and put it on a table with like a little, table card in front of it that says like Yankees hat, cell phone, cigarettes, then that would be like
Crest.
Super lame. Lame. Like, I would not pay any money to go to that. I'd be like begging to like get done and go home. But if I could walk into an immersive experience like that and see what life was like for real, 400 years, 350 years, 400 years in the past, I think that would be an amazing exhibit to go to.
Well, and to be fair, he was looking forward to the research opportunity that a lot of these things presented. And similarly, Gordon figured out a way for them to literally have immersive ways to learn about the culture too. It's brilliant. So
super immersive.
It's both things. There's so much. There's just a touch of magic in this episode, and I think we should jump to the next segment and talk about that because there's a lot of emotions around that.
Yeah, there really is. But I have one question for you before we go.
Oh no.
Do you think You think Gordon's been working too hard?
No,
Never.
not Gordon.
All right, Jessica, we've come to the part of the show where we explore the big ideas in the episode Lasting Impressions and discuss the meanings, morals, and messages to see if they align with the Roddenberry Star Trek philosophy. So what'd you pluck out of here as far as big ideas, big morals, big messages?
There's I mean, the whole thing overall is talking about obsession and addiction, kind of.
The A plot and the B plot both have that in common.
Right? And what's not funny, but not only have I dealt with, and we talked about this previously, like love addiction to some extent, or like obsession, not obsession, but just like, fixation, which is confusing because like we're supposed to fall in love. We want to fall in love. So like, it's hard to know that it's maybe not the healthiest thing for us because you're like, well, I was supposed to feel this way, but I've also been addicted to cigarettes. And so it was really, I also think that my addiction to cigarettes was along the same emotional wavelength as my tendency towards emotional turbulence that I experience. So it's this episode talks about one of my favorite things. If it's happening, does that mean it's not real? Like, just because I dreamed it, does that mean I didn't hang out with Arnold Schwarzenegger last night? Like, if I wanted to, I don't know why, but if I dreamt about it, like,
Is he really short in person? Or?
He's my height.
Okay.
Maybe like an inch taller. So like taller than Tom Cruise. But yes,
Gotcha.
not like, he's not hulking. But he's a big guy. He's a presence. He has his own bodyguard too, which is funny. Not funny, it just makes sense. So a thing I love exploring and a thing I have a hard time with is that nothing lasts. And I might just say I'm jumping all over the place. I also relate to her in the sadness over being forgotten. I think that is a thing a lot of artists struggle with because we also have a hard time feeling like we're recognized in our era as well. You look at Van Gogh, who was only appreciated after his death. Many artists only appreciated after their death, and how it drove them crazy. I just relate to that. And then you extrapolate that and apply it to relationships. We don't want to be forgotten by the people that we were with either,
right.
But when you're done with it, when it's over, they're telling you they don't want you for the rest of their life.
Yeah.
Which is, I don't know, it's tough.
And this is really interesting because I, for some reason, and I think it makes sense, was able to relate so well to Gordon's position. And to hear you kind of tell this from Laura's perspective is amazing. And another reason why I'm glad
I think I'm more Gordon in this situation, but like as a musician, I relate to her. But as like a hopeless romantic, I think I'm Gordon.
Yeah. Good. But for me, this was my 30s. Like, this was meeting somebody, just falling, 20s and 30s, really.
Sure, totally.
Say 25 to 35 or so. Meeting somebody, just being completely, like, more than infatuated. Like knowing that, like, I was head over heels in love with this person. That, this is somebody that I would, that I could, build my life around. And it was tough because they, for good or for bad, and ultimately I would have to think for good, all those relationships ended. But man, I could relate to Gordon so unbelievably well in this episode because he just put it out there. And he knew it. He knew what he was doing was weird, but he fell head over heels in love with this woman, and wanted desperately to make it work. Wanted desperately to be with somebody, and more than anything else, wanted to wanted to help her, achieve her goals, wanted to be better himself. In fact, it made him better, right? When has anybody ever called Gordon a good listener before?
Right.
Like, he was actually he was a better person around her for that. And that, was a story that I, lived through time after time, only to ultimately have things end. And normally end badly, hopefully with a little bit of class at the end, like Gordon showed, where you can gracefully move on. But, thankfully, as Kelly so eloquently put it, we are the result of all the relationships we've had in our life. And you can't pick and choose. And I don't think I would have been ready to meet my wife when we met, had I not been through all of that.
Totally.
So as painful as it is, and as many, some fond, some sad memories that this episode conjured up, I'm thankful for those experiences because they made me who I am today.
Yeah. I can also apply that to, I think I may have shared this on the podcast before, but I remember early on in my career, I was like, I wish I was the only artist. I wish I was the only person out there singing. What's really funny too is I did do the singing thing for a while too. I didn't have the backup band like she did, which would have been smart. But I was like sad girl with the guitar singing stuff too. I remember lamenting that other people were on the planet and that I couldn't be recognized because of that. And someone very smartly said, you wouldn't even know what art was if there weren't other people making art. I know what I want to make because I'm watching other people, and my art is just the way I do it, right? And then you can take that further down the road, and some people try to get perfect at their art. Then you're like, basically, the more you get perfect, you're taking out what makes it yours. There's a fine line between your imperfection and the way you express. So it's when Kelly comes to talk to Gordon about we are the sum total of our relationships. The real lesson then is, I think, acceptance overall. Like, present moment, I'm in the present moment. I got to experience this. I accept that. And if you truly love somebody, you're supposed to let them do what they need to do.
Yes.
And that's the hardest thing for us, I think, or at least for me.
100%.
If it doesn't do what I want it to do,
Yeah, it really is. You were talking about a little bit ago, being an aspiring musician. And
I was a musician. I wasn't aspiring. I was. But
you were. Okay.
Yeah.
Laura said at one point, I don't need to be a huge success. I just want to be rich enough to be unhappy, but not enough to be miserable. And I loved that line because when I got started in aviation, I didn't care if I was going to fly the biggest airplane for the biggest airline, making the most amount of money. I mean, those are all kind of, it drives other people. And I think it's very kind of, ego driven. I just wanted to be in the industry, and I just wanted to have the best flying job I could get, at the time. And I just kind of wanted to be part of, something that I knew I loved to do. And that's what I got out of her line of, I don't need to be a huge success. I basically just want to be successful. And I really did recognize that, or at least what it meant to me was how much passion she does have for music, that she's not in it as a means to an end. She just wants to be in it because she loves to do it.
Totally. And I love, though, that she also isn't saying, I could do this for free. Because just because it's an art thing doesn't mean you shouldn't expect to get paid or want to get paid. And I remember early on in my career, when I would tell people what I wanted to do, or that I wanted to be an actor, or that I wrote songs, especially in LA, people have this idea of you. When you're not a producer or director and you're an actor, you need them. I need to be, you've lost a lot of people's respect in that moment. So like I try not to lead with, hey, I'm an actor or whatever. And then when you start making friends or talking about it, people start thinking all you want is fame. And so then I would dial back what I wanted. So I'd be like, oh, I'm cool if I just get like a guest star in a TV. I just want a regular job. I want to make enough money. And then I realized, this is my personal lead. I don't know if Laura is lying. I don't think she is, quote unquote, real Laura. But I was dialing back my ambition so that other people felt more comfortable when I shared what my dreams were. So then, that was maybe 5 years ago, maybe a little bit more, I started going, hey man, I could be famous. That'd be great. I could also work a day job as an actor. I just stopped putting a cap on what is possible with his career. But the lowest thing I want to accept is making money in this career. So
right.
It is first and foremost the most important part. And it's hard because they also expect you to work for free in this job. She's not getting paid for that gig. How's she paying the cellist? I don't know. Is the Macy's job subsidying it? So anyway, it's just a long way to say that you just because you want to get paid for something does not mean you're dispassionate about it.
Right. Yes, and I also and what I was getting at,
and I know you weren't suggesting that. It just was.
Yeah, no, I was suggesting just the ability to. I think what she was getting at is to be able to live the life where she gets to create and doesn't have to worry about handbags at Macy's.
Yeah,
would be ideal.
It's the ideal, and it's clear she wasn't Billy Joel, right? She didn't last the timeline of Billy Joel, but she could have seen some success. We don't know. But honestly, even if she's not, even if she doesn't get past that bar, she is a success in that she's doing it. She's trying. That's a success. That's a win. So
we were the last, I think, where we started to digress was the mess hall intervention.
Yeah.
With the group, and a couple of things were said in there that I really think, and like this show is so really, really good at, is not the action sequences, which are sometimes satisfying and fun to watch, but the conversations. And I think this episode really, in a lot of ways, came down to probably this conversation as well as the conversation between Kelly and Gordon towards the end of the episode. But at this point, Ed said something like it's a simulation. It's like our cowboy simulation or Bortus's sex lagoon. And Gordon said, and it's not like those things because somebody wrote those programs. We wrote the cowboy program. Somebody else wrote Bortus's sex lagoon program. But this program, Laura wrote herself. How is that any different than Isaac? And Tala said, well, Isaac is self-aware. And Gordon was like, well, is he? How do we know he is? And then it's just sort of you could tell he was kind of starting to make excuses. My question is, do we know that Laura isn't?
Well, I think that's the argument that Gordon's point hinges on, right? I think it's semantics, kind of, because like there is, like, she obviously is consenting. She likes him, right? And we have to assume that the ship's computer extrapolated has enough information to kind of know she probably would have liked him IRL. If we're talking about IRL in 2015, we know what that means. But what do you think IRL means in 400 years later?
I don't know, man. Maybe like intergalactic reality.
Longboard. So
sure.
I think that's right. So what the best philosophical argument Seth / Ed brings to the table is reality is not determined by individual perception. And that is the basis for the majority of our disagreements is people viewing reality differently.
I loved that line in here. I made a note of it. The universe isn't governed by individual perception. It matters what's true. And until we can agree on what's true, it's hard to have that real conversation and draw real conclusions from that. Reality is kind of a three-edged sword, right? There's what you think is true, there's what I think is true, and then there's what's actually true. So,
science this is why I actually love believing in science to some extent,
right.
Is they're willing to go, oh, we got that wrong. Or, oh, it was sort of what we thought it was. Oh, it was nothing what we thought it was. Or that the rules can be broken in certain subsets of space, etc. So as a science-loving man, Seth MacFarlane can also knows that, like, love kind of bends those rules too. So, like, Ed's just pissed, right? Like, because Gordon's being so.
You think he's just jealous? You think he's just jealous because they're best friends and now he's got a girlfriend?
No, not at all.
It's not. They're not going to do that again after Blood Patriots.
Blood Patriots. It's such a dumb argument. I think Ed's pissed, as I'm sure you know, that he said, well, you got duped by a krill. Like, there's, that, and it's cruel. You can see Seth Ed seething in that moment. It's a strong.
It was good.
Moment.
And his comeback was good. She lied to me. I wasn't lying to myself.
There's a lot of good in this episode.
Yeah. And Kelly's very empathetic line where she said, I bet she was really cool.
Yeah.
When she was alive.
Yeah. Like, also, you want that group of friends. You want that group of friends that are going to empathize with you and also give it to you straight. And that is also, it's also their perception of reality too. So you want people to give it to you straight, and it's still their opinion at the end of the day. You know? So it's nothing is so cut and dry. Like, I don't think Gordon did anything wrong. And what I think Gordon walked away with is a better understanding of his capacity to love.
I think that's very, very true. Another sort of big ticket item in this discussion I think we have is a line pretty early on when after Gordon's first visit to the simulator, and he was telling John, and John was all excited, and Gordon was all excited, and John was not. But Gordon said, you look at these people who lived hundreds of years ago, and they're so distant looking. It's easy to think that they don't matter. But when you're standing in a room like that, you realize this used to be their world, and it was just as alive to them as ours is to us. And I don't know that necessarily plays into Gordon falling in love with Laura the way he did. But what it gave to me was an appreciation. And it's something that's been, brewing over the course of my lifetime. Because what do you say when you're young, right? And people try to teach you history, and you look at black and white pictures, and none of that means anything to you, right? It doesn't, it's not relatable. But if you can somehow sort of summon, the imagination or the realization that, life to those people was just as important, just as even probably more perilous, just as rich with, emotion and relationships and curiosity and growth and color, that, we just we tend to not appreciate because it's in old photos or a history book somewhere. Yeah. And I think that was a very, very interesting nugget that I think really this whole episode was in many, many ways built around. Yeah. I
remember the first time I saw the episode, I was like, how could we have lost touch? How could they have lost so much touch that they don't know what an iPhone is? You know what I mean?
Right.
Or that they can't open one. How is it? How's 400 years? If it's such a technologically advanced generation, how is it so out of touch with what we had? Coke doesn't exist anymore. You know what I mean? But things go very quickly.
They do. Technology changes. And, 400 years ago, what was technology of the day? That was, 1600 and something. I don't know. I certainly, when I think about people, in the 1620s, I think of them more of, sadly as caricatures than I do actually three-dimensional people.
Totally.
And I think that's sort of you stick me in an old farmhouse with an ox and a bunch of farm tools and stuff. I'm not going to know how to go out there and, make food.
You figure it out. Hopefully,
I think
or
I'd probably,
die.
yeah. I think it'd be option B for me.
Right. That's totally fair. I think having a healthy awareness that other people are experiencing life at the same time, have already experienced life at the same time, that you're having a singular experience and you're having a collective experience, are having a healthy understanding of both those things is good for your life. And I don't think Gordon's selfish, but I think Gordon getting a chance to step outside of himself is not a bad thing. I don't think what I'm trying to say is I don't think this was a lesson that Gordon needed necessarily, but I think maybe he needed to know he was worthy, right?
Yeah.
And that he fits into this group of humans.
Yes, and I don't like you said, I don't think it was anything that was a character flaw or anything. I mean, he just literally, I think, stumbled onto somebody that he was smitten with, that he found fascinating, whether it was the time period or the simplicity or the genuineness of Laura. I think he just found himself in love.
Question. There's a whole album by a band called Neutral Milk Hotel, which is really just a front man who has like a crazy, theremins and saws and stuff like that. And it's really amazing. And the album is called In the Airplane Over the Sea. And it's basically a love letter to Anne Frank. And he laments that he couldn't have saved her. He laments, he loves her, and she's a kid, he's not saying I'm in love with a child. He's saying I could have loved this woman had she had the opportunity to be, if I was alive or whatever. So kind of reminds me of that. And it's a bittersweet album. It's very good, I think. Is there a historical figure that Mike Richards would have been in love with just based off of your interest? Or even like a movie star, or James Stewart, or who knows?
Oh, I don't know. Might have been James Stewart.
I know.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, physical attractiveness side, I think Audrey Hepburn was gorgeous. I think Donna Reed was gorgeous. I think there were probably for each of those, there were probably a million Laura Higgins around that I, would have loved to get to know and.
Sure.
And learn more about. And I think that's the key to this, is that this was a person who, other than this phone, was amazing and creative and had goals and had dreams and had aspirations. And if it wasn't for finding this phone, if it wasn't for her making the decision to put the phone in the time capsule, history would have forgotten her. So I think there are millions of people for every, notable historical figure that are worth getting to know.
Right. I think something that we have to come to terms with is it's okay to be forgotten. I think it's The Boys that talks about this, that there's two deaths, your actual death, and then the last time someone thinks about you. Which is hard to quantify, right?
Right.
Like, I could think about my great-grandmother right now, and when was the last time someone thought about her? She could have died. She died. I knew her. But, if I was the last person that thought about her, she just died now. You know what I mean?
Right.
So, but it is true, right? That person no longer exists. And there's so many humans we will never even be able to conjure entities. Let's go past the universe. We have no idea. Things that have existed that we'll have no idea. Planets.
Right. Whole civilizations, I'm sure.
So I think whether it's explicitly said or not, this episode is a meditation on being present and in the moment.
I think that is a very good summation of it. I did want to talk to you about one more sort of, element of the episode before we kind of move on to the final wrap up. And that was that final conversation where Kelly came into Gordon's quarters to have that conversation with him about, being the sum part of our relationships and humans are born a blank slate and that kind of thing. At first I thought that should be Ed's job.
Right.
Ed's his best friend.
Right.
And at first I wondered, why is Kelly doing this? Is Ed busy? I don't know. Making last minute scene changes or script changes to the last scene, or since he wrote this episode, I don't know. But then it kind of hit me that she was able to offer maybe a little bit more of Laura's perspective, the female perspective, to Gordon. How did you feel about how that played out? Should it have been Ed? Are you okay with it being Kelly? Was Kelly able to bring something that Ed could not?
Yeah, I think, probably on a logistical side, Seth is like, this is a good moment for, Adrian Pilecki to shine. B, it's clear that, well, maybe it's not clear. Maybe Ed and Gordon are maybe still a little pissed at each other, but obviously Ed knows what happened. So, it's possible, Ed could be pissed, sorry, man, that sucks.
Because she opened with, Ed told me what happened.
Right.
Yeah.
And I've experienced being off-putting personally to friends because I've dealt with, the same situation over and over again, romantically, to the point where it's I can't really help you anymore. My sister's I can't help you anymore. I've already told you. So it could be what's happening. This could be partly it. And I don't think it's the female perspective. I think it's Kelly's perspective.
Right.
Her being able, we know that she loves Ed. We know Ed still loves her. But I think Kelly is able to give it to him straight and not overpromise. She doesn't say you're going to find love again. I think Kelly has historically been straightforward and realistic while also knowing how to soothe things. And if I was going through what Ed was going through, I would want someone to not make fake promises and just tell me what it was. And she was still really reassuring, I thought, so in a beautiful way.
She was. It was a very good scene. And there's never not a good time for Adrian Pilecki to shine. So I think that was a very good point that you made. You think this episode would have made Gene Roddenberry proud?
I don't know. Probably.
Yeah, it was probably something we might see, next gen ish. Maybe we kind of did see it next gen when Geordi fell in love with his hollow engineer, whose name is escaping me right now, but I'm sure people are similar. Screaming into the into their headphones right now.
Get over yourselves. I remember thinking this on my rewatch.
Leah Brahms.
There you go, got it. This is an episode that only Orville could give us, and it proves why we need Orville, or why Orville is different from Star Trek in a good way. We got to have this excellent story.
We got to, and they got to really kind of jump on the points that we talked about that you pointed out before. That it's that kind of thought exercise that we can only get on a show like this, where we talk about expanding and growing as part of the relationships, the sum total of our relationships. Driving home the point that the universe isn't governed by individual perception. It matters what's true. I remember going back to another production that we've referenced a couple of times, Cosmos, produced by Seth MacFarlane and Brandon Braga, hosted by Neil deGrasse Tyson, where Neil deGrasse Tyson said scientists have prejudices and baggage and preconceived notions, and it's the science that's supposed to strip all of those things away so that we can talk about what's true. You know, and then finally just, you know, maybe the fear of being forgotten or the, you know, the hope to be remembered. You know, it wasn't lost on me that in their first sort of post Laura's set at the pub, when she said, I think what I really want to be, though, is remembered. You know, nothing's more sad than being forgotten. And at the end, when she said, are we going to keep in touch? And he said, I can make you this promise. You will not be forgotten. And I think, you know, it reminded me of the line. I did a little research. I didn't know this, you know, an hour ago, but Benjamin Franklin wrote in Poor Richard's Almanac, no relation. If you would not be forgotten as soon as you are dead and rotten, either write things worth reading or do things worth writing. And I think by the fact that, you know, Laura was who she was and donated her phone into the time capsule, she was able to be remembered when other people, amazing, creative, sensitive, wonderful people maybe aren't. And I think we have to do what we can to keep the memories of people alive because they're special and unique. And, you know, let's face it, we only come around once.
And they inform who we are.
100%. Mission Log the Orville is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. Technical production by the incomparable Earl Green. Our website and your opportunity to connect with us is podcasts.roddenberry.com.
Join us next time on Mission Log the Orville as Mike and I discuss Sanctuary. This is a Roddenberry podcast. For more great podcasts, visit podcast.roddenberry.com.